have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which business affecting the interest is discussed and or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, Passaic County, Manchester Regional Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published in the North Jersey Herald News, the board's official newspaper, on January 14th of 2021. Notice of the regular meeting, indicated date, time, and place were posted in public view and posted on all social media platforms in the MRHS community and the clerks in the municipalities of Haledon, North Haledon, and Prospect Park. Now be it resolved that this virtual/in-person Board of Education meeting be recorded. Public comments. Public comments for an in-person/virtual meeting will be conducted in the following manner. 1. Written comments may be sent via email or written letter addressed to the board secretary and must be received by 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting. 2. In-person comments will be addressed and have a 3-minute cap. Remote comments will be addressed when the public participants use the raise hand feature. Please review the standards of conduct procedures for all public participation posted under the Board of Education on our website. Roll call, please.
Miss Eric.
Sorry, present.
Miss Baez. Mr. Barca.
Here.
Mr. DeMarco.
Here.
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mrs. Fusco. She here?
Nice here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Vandermolen.
Here.
And Mr. Panzera.
Here. Correspondence. Someone like to move correspondence?
I'll move correspondence.
First by Mr. Barca, second by Mr. Vandermolen. Roll call, please.
Miss Baez.
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes, and I can't wait to hear Mr. Banta play that trombone.
Mr. DeMarco.
Yes.
Miss Eric.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
And Mr. Panzera.
Yes. At this time, we have presentations. Mr. Coviello will present the scholars for marking period 1. Mr. Coviello, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Panzera. Very excited, as always, to acknowledge our fine students, especially when they achieve new heights, not just academically, but in all endeavors. And tonight, I'm very proud to announce scholars of the marking period for marking period 1 department, and read each name and give everybody a chance to be recognized. So for the art department, scholar of marking period 1, Carrasco Perez. Congratulations. For business education, Tyreek Abu Zaid. For computer arts, Amaris Vasquez. For English, Karina Guerrero. For English as a second language, Farida Tambieva. For dramatic arts, Anika Morris. TV video, Nacheli Cuesta Abreu. Foreign language, Tasneem Mirza. For marketing education, Beyonce Miller. For mathematics, Adil Abdullah. For music instrumental, Justin Morgan. Music vocal, Azira White. For physical education and health, Michaela Alfano. Also for physical education and health, Arnold Nunez. Science Department, James Davis. Social Studies, Maria Guerrero. General Studies, Mahmoud Al-Sheikh. And finally, for computer science, Mohammed Adiyat. Congratulations to all of our scholars of the marking period for marking period 1.
Thank you, Mr. Coviello. And congratulations once again to all the scholars in marking period number 1. Okay, at this time, Mr. Sarapilia will give a presentation on the June 2020 audit. Mr. Sarapilia, you have the floor.
All right, hold on one sec. We're going to get set up over here.
And while we're getting prepared here, just a quick note, this is always my favorite part of education is the celebration of our students. And I thank you, Mr. Coviello, and I congratulate all our students for their hard work and dedication. I wish we could, of course, be together, and I can't wait to meet you. I really look forward to that day. So congratulations again.
This is it. All right. So good evening. Everyone hear me? We are going to be presenting the 2019-2020 audit. Which one I got to add? The green one? Which one? Wait, wrong. This is the wrong.
You have the budget.
All right. I hope you guys are like my voice. You're going to hear me talking for a little while tonight. So as I said, today is the presentation of the June 30th, 2020 audit. Presentation by myself. And what we are going to be reviewing is the audit done by our auditing firm. What was reviewed was the 2019-2020 school year. And that review included all of business office operations. So what was looked at, and I'll give you a quick overview of some of the things that were reviewed, were financial planning, accounting and reporting, administrative practices, position control rosters, payroll, how expenditures were classified in purchasing, board secretaries reports, fixed asset reports, things like TPAF reimbursement, non-public school aid, like I said, the school purchasing program, school food service program, student activities funds, our application for school, state school aid, which is our ASSA, our DRTRS, whether or not we had complied with testing for lead and all drinking water fountain regulations. The audit is basically a review of the operations of the school. Anything that, findings aren't necessarily, a negative to us. I mean, it's just something that we need to improve upon. So what is a school audit? School audit is an assessment of the finances and operations of the school district, focuses on the financial stability of the district. Audit represents the final numbers for expenditures and revenues for the previous school year. What we're going to be talking about, especially in one of the reports, is really where we were at financially as of 6/30/2020. For that one moment in time, those numbers almost immediately started changing once we changed over into the new school year. The audit's going to show the financial health of the district, and as well as the financial health of its various enterprise funds. Audit also has areas for improvements that are categorized as findings. An audit offers a district protection by identifying issues before they become headlines and putting into place procedures and protocols that safeguard the school board and staff. It is also used to ensure the district is a good steward of taxpayer dollars. So really the two things that an audit is really looking to do is seeing where you're at financially, but also making sure that you have procedures in place, what they tab it as is internal controls, to make sure things like fraud can't possibly occur. So for the 2019-20 school year, Manchester Board of Education had one audit finding. There was one instance of an eligible employee that was not enrolled in TPAF. This was something that was corrected during the course of the year. However, the employee wasn't enrolled in a timely manner, which is why we had an audit finding for it. There was also a deficit in the community service program. If you'll recall, we actually had this audit comment in the 18-19 audit year. When we did receive it, we weren't able to correct it during the 19-20 school year. We were instructed to make sure that we budgeted in the 2020-21 school year to make a transfer to cover this deficit. That's why it's not a finding, but it is mentioned within the audit report. But that was it in terms of findings. So, for all of the paperwork, everything all the documentation, all the work that the business office did over the last, or during the 19-20 school year, there was one error that was found. It was minor in nature. It had been already taken care of. But per the audit, we are required to do a corrective action plan, which is on the agenda tonight. There's going to be two resolutions, one approving or accepting the audit, and one speaking to the corrective action plan. The corrective action plan is going to have the requirements of pension enrollment to be reviewed. And part of the action plan has a periodic review by personnel to ensure proper enrollment in pension programs. That review would be done monthly. So that's in terms of the operations. The next part that we're really going to get into is the financial part of it. One area, if you want to understand how we wound up where we are, because we're going to start talking about reserves and excess surplus and things like that, the area that you're going to want to look in, and this is in the big budget book, the big blue one, that it was distributed to the Board of Education. You want to go to the C schedules, which starts on page 72. And the C schedules basically take you from where we started as of July 1st, 2019, with our original budget. That was the budget that was approved, that was voted on by the Board of Education that we had worked on, basically 2 years ago. Any of the transfers that had to get done during the 19-20 school year, what wound up being the final budget, which is different than what is because you'll see another column which is called actual. So what the audit is going to do is compare what we had in terms of the final budget versus what actually occurred within that line. And on the revenue side, for instance, you'll see some lines like tax levy. We had a final budget. We were at an original budget of $11,161,000 in taxes to be collected. Our final budget was $11,161,000, and the actual amount collected was $11,161,000. So there was no variance. Some of the other areas on the revenue side, if you see a variance to the negative, that means that there was not as much money collected. And again, that's on the revenue side. But where we see a lot of big variance, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is on the expenditure side. There was a lot of variance and from the actual amount spent in the lines to what the final budget wound up being. And part of the reason for that was, well, really the main reason for that was due to the pandemic. Our school has expenses that are anticipated to be operating, that the building will be open from July 1st through June 30th. Mid-March, our buildings closed down. and a lot of our expenditures stopped at that time. We didn't have, if you recall, there was no transportation that was being done. And while the state of New Jersey did say that we were required to make a payment on the transportation, it wasn't nearly what we had budgeted for it. So if you actually go to, let's see, what page is it on? Well, yeah, if you go onto page 75, you'll see that there is a big surplus within the transportation lines. This, like I said, this was due and really due to the pandemic. While we have still been going back and forth with the county and PCESC in regards to the payments that are due, we still have amounts that are encumbered within there, but we did receive a 30% discount in regards to what we had initially budgeted and what was initially awarded. And you'll see that throughout the budget. A lot of the lines had a final budget amount, and the actual amount spent was significantly less, which resulted in a surplus within the expenditure side of the budget. So we are going to be talking about that in a little bit. Just to kind of give you a look back, at the end of June 30th, 2019, we had a fund balance of $582,000. Fund balance was at the limit. The limit is 2% of total expenditures. So the fund balance limit that we had at June 30th, 2019 was based on the expenditures made during the 2018-19 school year. It was 2% of that number. We actually were above that by about $321,000. That's considered excess surplus. And that was required for us to designate it or spend it in the 2020-21 school year. Our capital reserve was at $357,000. Our maintenance reserve was at $41,000, and our emergency reserve was at $170,000. So now we fast forward 1 year. Fund balance was at $1.595 million. This is a very large fund balance. We are over the 2% number. We're going to be talking about excess surplus of almost, actually over $1 million. This is money that needs to be set aside, needs to be spent in the 2021-22 school year. The important thing to note about this is that this is a one-time influx of revenue into the budget for 2021-22. So ideally, and we've had conversations with about this with our auditors, it should be going towards a one-time expenditure. If you used it, for instance, to, let's say, hire new staff, or, to basically pay for anything that is a reoccurring expense. This is not revenue that's going to, continually be there in 2022, 23, 23, 24. So we were actually talking about this in finance, that if you started to apply it towards expenses that repeated themselves, you would have the money there in 21, 22, but in future years, you would actually have to talk about cutting, because if you couldn't find a new revenue stream to make up for this money, you would have to balance out the equation by making a cut on the expense side. We did make a deposit at the end of the 1920 school year into our capital reserve. So now that's up to $609,000. And maintenance and emergency reserve just differed slightly, increased slightly due to interest. Yes. No, just the $1,022,000. That's the excess surplus amount.
Your perspective is that the $1,022,000 must be spent because it's over reserve.
Yeah, this is regulations. It's when we start putting together the budget, that number is going to show up in our budget software.
Quick question. I know that we said that we had projects that we have on the table, but I know that it's a one-time influx, but due to the circumstances with COVID and people not working, is there any way that we can take those savings and put it and give it to our taxpayers?
Well, again, if you're utilizing it to reduce taxes, what you're in essence doing is using it to fund repeating expenses. So while we can certainly look at that, the concern that I would have is that if you did that for 2021-22, for 2022-23, that money wouldn't be there. And unless there was another way for, for that gap on the funding side to be made up, you would be forced to make cuts. So it actually would be, in a long haul, a detriment to the school district.
But this is like precedented times, like, people are losing their houses. So it's not like, I think that they would understand if in fact this is something that's not guaranteed or something that, down the line, they may not have.
But that what I'm saying then is that then we would be talking about potentially people losing their position, their jobs, because again, if it's not a repeating expense, it would either be that we would cut taxes one year to then raise them back up the next year, or we would be reducing taxes with some of this money to then make a cut in 2022-23.
In any event, we're not close to a finished product on the budget yet, so we're
Right,
it's just
right. But I also, I wanted to put that out there, but I also wanted to look at that on paper too.
Well, we are, like I said, we're certainly, understand that fact of what's going on in the world in regards to COVID, and we're certainly not, my intent is not to, come here and say that we're going to be raising taxes or anything like that, but what I'm letting the board know is that this money is not going to continually be there.
No,
got
that. No.
So it's one of those things where I'm stating, if and certainly that's something that can be considered. What I and again, it's the decision of the board. What I'm just letting everyone know is that if you do go down that path, unless state aid increases, you are going to be making a cut in 2022-23 to basically make up for anything that was, any of the significant money that was, if it was given back in taxes.
and that's the hard part right now because there's a lot of unknowns that are out there at this point, especially with the state funding.
Yes.
Yeah, that is true. But we also have taxpayers that if they don't pay their taxes or they lose their homes, they're still in that position too of raising taxes later on.
Yes, and I believe that this board over the last 3 years, it's only raised taxes once, and 2 years ago it actually cut taxes and cut them very significantly. So it is something that this board has done in the past. Again, this is just letting everybody know that this is not repeating. That's the essence of what I'm trying to get across here is that it's not something that we're going to continually have. It's not like when we had the increase in state aid where we could count on that from year to year to continually have that. And in fact, we had it this past year where state aid was cut. And I think we're, at least from my office, we're anticipating further cuts in state aid because just as we spoke about, the community's hurting, the entire state's hurting in terms of bringing revenues in. So if that's the case, then we can't, we shouldn't expect state aid to increase. We should actually expect state aid to decrease, which would, necessitate further cuts, within our budget.
And that's something the board just needs to put on the table in terms of that.
John, question, maybe you're going to get to it, but how about tuition reserve? Is it possible we could put part of that there, knowing that we've got probably a potential large increase at PCTI?
Well, the tuition reserve has to, the deposit usually has to be for something that you kind of know is going to be coming. We actually do anticipate a tuition reserve deposit for this year because of the fact that the enrollment is higher than what we had budgeted for in the 2020-21 school year. And that's something else that we're going to talk about both now and in my budget presentation or my budget 101. But it is something that we didn't have we weren't underfunding PCTI payments last year in 1920. So we didn't need to make a tuition reserve deposit. We can make a tuition reserve deposit at the end of the 2021 school year because we are the amount that we're paying does not cover the amount of students that we have in there. And we will be getting a bill on this, not in 21-22, but in 22-23. That's just the way it works. I know it sounds a little bit crazy. You know, you're operating in multiple years. So other notable numbers, some of the other things that I wanted to kind of point out from the budget. Food service had a $108,000 loss. This was due exclusively to the pandemic. Usually we're talking about profits in here. If we do have a loss, it's simply because we spent a lot of money to bring down those numbers. We still have a healthy reserve of about $304,000. However, I do anticipate it going down further because of the fact that the pandemic is still ongoing. Our technology program actually experienced a $21,000 gain, which brought our reserves up to $188,000. And the unemployment account is very healthy at almost $319,000.
I'm sorry, John, can you explain the service, the loss? When you say loss, why was it a loss?
It was a loss because we were providing our food service revenues went from serving 700 meals a day to anywhere from 25 to 75 a day. At the time, we were not sure how long the pandemic was going to last. If you'll recall, in March and April, it wasn't that we were certain that we weren't going to be back in May and June. We had gotten direction that we weren't to really let go of staff from the state of New Jersey because they didn't want us bumping up their unemployment numbers. So all of that's sort of contributed to the fact that and we were we never got we couldn't get a good handle on the number of meals that were going to be picked up. So all of that contributed to the loss in the 1920 school year.
Okay, so we basically were paying staff, and then we like kind of over budgeted, not over budgeted, but had a lot of food on hand that we purchased.
Well, we didn't. I mean, we didn't. Obviously, we weren't still buying for 800 kids a day.
No, got
but we were only serving. I think the numbers were like 25, 50. We did try cutting it down and having just 2 days of pickups. But like I said, at the end of the day, there wasn't enough revenue coming in from those sources.
Somewhat of a surprise is the technology number with a small gain there, which is
Yes.
is a pleasant surprise.
Is that CARES money or is it?
The technology? No, that's a enterprise fund. As you recall, we do shared services with our technology program. This was basically a net gain based on basically the shared services that we have. In part, we did do a little bit more work in the 1920 school year, especially with some of the towns and whatnot.
Hey, John, with the food service, does that include any kind of reimbursements from the federal government?
Yes, we get, we're a CEP school district, so we receive reimbursement from the federal government on on the meals that we serve. So the next steps for tonight, the board is going to be approving the audit and the corrective action plan. The audit, corrective action plan, and several other documents are submitted to the state of New Jersey. The district then implements the corrective action plan, and then the corrective action plan is reviewed in June by my office, and then we give an assessment to the state as to whether or not the corrective action plan is being followed. So in conclusion, in regards to our audit, we did have one minor finding for the 1920 and for the 2021 school year. We are not tapping into reserves, which actually is a very good sign. In years past, we had been utilizing reserves to help keep the budget going, which I sort of describe as, emptying out your savings account, and then unless you're replenishing it, eventually at some point you're in essence kicking the can down the curb about eventual cuts that you would need to make. Again, the pandemic thwarted a lot of our momentum, that we had been experiencing steady increases in state aid. The cut in state aid this year resulted in a loss of a lot of construction projects, as well as additional budget positions that we had budgeted for in the 2020-21 school year. One thing that I did, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, we need to keep an eye on our PCTI enrollment. We are expecting a very healthy increase in enrollment for the 2021-22 school year. The senior class that is graduating is rather small from PCTI, or rather, it's rather small compared to some of the classes that they've been intaking the last couple of years. So we could see an increase of, I said 30 to 40 kids. If it was 40 kids, additional students going there, that would result in an increase of at least $400,000 on the tuition side. It could also result in an increase on transportation costs of anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000. If we are still within the pandemic, that increase on the transportation could be significantly more. So it is, like I said, something that I just want the board to know about as we get into the budget process. So that's the end of my presentation on the audit. Does anybody have any questions?
Good job, John.
Yeah, I think that was a great job as far
Very
as,
good job.
running the business office.
Thank you. And like I said, I really want to commend my staff. Like I said, this was actually really fantastic. And like I said, it was one audit comment, and and even in researching it, it wasn't even entirely our fault. We weren't able to get all the information that we needed from the one new staff member, which is why that was an issue. But like I said, going forward, this audit will be posted online, the CAFR as well as the management report. It is, like I said, the CAFR is a very large book, as I kind of explained in the finance. It's sort of a way of translating our operations to the financial world. As you'll recall, school districts can go out for bonding. Part of the bonding that they go out for, investors would be looking at our financial books. Now, obviously, as a school district, we sort of know that we're always going to be here, but an outside investor wants the assurances, so they want to look at things like our assets, our liabilities, and then the CAFR sort of translates that across the spectrum, so that the audit that you're looking at here would be similar to a school district out in California, rather than each state having their own sort of set of numbers and their set of way of doing their books. So again, that's why the big book is really so big. Again, there's so many reports and numbers in there. So that's the audit. I guess the next thing that we'll get up to is the budget. All right, so now that we spoke about the audit, and we are at the beginning of this process, is Budget 101, which again, some of you, this might look familiar to, but I always like to kind of go through this at the, like I said, in January, once we get through the organizational meeting, because again, it's sort of a macro view before we get into all of the details and, the numbers, and we're talking about, the costs on this and that, to kind of give you a bird's eye, 10,000 feet up view of how the budget is put together. So what is a school budget? School budget, in theory, is about the priorities for our students. Ideally, you would say, we really want to focus on math this year, and you would see an increased spending on the math side. The reality is it's very much about money. Decisions are made with finances in mind. We're very much governed by the fact, we have a 2% cap. We have to be cognizant of the fact of where taxes are within our 3 towns. We're also, like we spoke about before, there's also other items going on here. There is a pandemic. There is some financial hardship going on throughout our communities, our state, and our country, really in our world. So we are putting together a budget on the fiscal calendar, July 1st through June 30th. So the budget that we're working on right now, or we're going to start working on, is going to start July 1st, 2021, and it's going to go through June 30th of 2022. So one of the things that I always sort of like to say is that, we're sort of trying to project out expenses for things that haven't happened yet. And, we're trying to project out now in, let's say, January and February, where we're going to be at in terms of oil prices and natural gas prices in May of 2022. When we're talking about budgets, we're talking about educated guesses. We're going to be looking at trend analysis. We're going to be looking at projections. We're going to be looking at proposals and various other documents. But at the end of the day, it really is an educated guess. It's a very good guess based on all the data that's available, but it is still a guess. When we are putting together a budget, the 2 simple rules that we must follow, tax revenue must be within cap or within cap plus waivers. The cap is 2%. And the most basic one is that revenues must equal expenses, which means you must have enough money coming in to cover all the expenses that you have with the money going out. So where does the money come from? For Manchester, the majority of the money comes from 2 main sources: local taxes and state aid. Federal aid is probably federal aid and grants, which is your Fund 20. That makes up probably the next largest portion of it. You do have small amounts of interest that the school district collects on money that it has in its accounts. We have had in the past money come in for tuition, and for us being a school choice program, we really can't collect tuition. However, we are able to collect from the state and from other school districts if we have students that are deemed homeless that are attending our school. And the other large area that we have as a revenue, it's not a repeating revenue, but it is something that we have utilized in the past, which is utilizing our surplus or our withdrawals from our reserve. We spoke about this in the audit. Our reserves are our savings accounts. The state of New Jersey allows you to have several accounts of which you can deposit money into that is outside the 2% cap in terms of your surplus. Those accounts include your capital projects. The state of New Jersey allows you to save up money for capital projects. It allows you to save up money, what we spoke about before, tuition reserves, if you're going through the course of a school year. And you know that at the end of the year, when the basically the out of district placements do their audits, they're going to say you owe additional monies. For us, that's the biggest one for the tuition reserve has always been PCTI. Just a quick story on how PCTI tuitions work. In February, PCTI provides us with their estimated enrollment for the 2021-22 school year. So they might say, you're going to owe us for 350 kids. If we have 360 kids that enroll there, PCTI is not going to collect for 360 kids. They said they're going to collect for 350 kids. We set up our whole budget for 350 kids. However, they are going to keep track of those 10 extra kids that they've been educating and not getting paid for, basically. And within 2 years' time, they are going to basically bill us for it. So the state of New Jersey says, hey, listen, if you know that bill is coming, rather than that hit your budget within 2 years, if you have the ability to save it within your current year, you can and make a deposit into your tuition reserve. Again, this is the way the state of New Jersey works. I know some people are probably saying, why don't you pay it, this year? Because again, it could be that, the number varies so much from even it varies from month to month in regards to the amount of students that we have going to PCTI. So that's the revenue side of the budget. Again, as I spoke about, while expenses can and do change during the course of the school year, which we just spoke about when we looked at our audit, the main revenues for schools, taxes and aid, do not. And I say do not, and then it's sort of a misnomer, because last year, or this 21, 22 school year, state aid actually did change, but it went down. But for the most part, state aid is frozen. Taxes, once the board approves what the taxes are going to be, that can't change. So the reason why I mention this is that expenses will change during the course of the school year. And if expenses rise during the course of the school year, more often than not, we're going to have to shift expenses around. And what I mean is that we're going to have to spend less in other areas to make up for those increased costs. Again, we do have reserves, specifically emergency reserves. However, the state of New Jersey is very stringent in regards to when you can utilize that reserve. And it sort of wants you to explore all these other options and utilize any other funds you have within the district prior to utilizing the emergency reserve. So we spoke about where the money comes in from. Where does it go? Main areas: salary and benefits, out-of-district tuition costs, utility costs, repairs, maintenance, and I throw in there capital projects, professional services, technology, transportation costs, supplies, textbooks, materials, and support services. And we'll get into a little bit more detail with those in a little bit. So we talk about caps. What we're talking about is a 2% cap on taxes. Now, it's not a 2% cap on the budget. So that's really an important distinction, because while we do get a large portion of our revenue from taxes, we do not get all of it from taxes. So if there is a restriction on the tax side, and for a couple of years, if you recall, we actually had state aid was frozen. So, it was about 30–40% of our revenue wasn't increasing from year to year. So even though the taxes were going up 2%, our overall budget wasn't able to go up 2% because, and we'll get into the math of it, but only half, let's say, of revenues were going up 2%. The other half was staying pretty much flat, which meant an overall increase of about 1% on the budget. Now, again, we do have the ability to go above the 2% number. Again, that's not something that I'm saying we're going to be doing this year. However, I'm just letting the board and the public know that there is items in there called waivers. We have something called bank cap that allows school districts to go above the 2% tax number. So how does the board decide what goes into the budget? One of the things that we sort of, we approach the budget from is not necessarily a zero-based budget, but we sort of want to keep the operations that we have going for this year into next year. Now we're going to talk about that in a little bit. If enrollment is changing drastically, we certainly would look at, changes in our personnel, whether it's adding staff or letting staff go. But we are looking to continue operations as we have in the past. Now, we are always looking at the potential of savings, and whenever we can, we do invest the money in there. For instance, you'll recall during the 2021 or 2020-21 school year, we had students that were projected to go out of district. We were able to set up a program in-house that was able to save the district $75,000. And we're going to get into this again in a little bit longer and a little bit later. But what we look at are salaries, benefits. We're looking at continuing, like I said, with the staff. I'm going to be looking at trend analysis. We're going to be getting proposals, estimates for the upcoming school year. The superintendent and, along with myself, are going to be working with the administration, projecting out numbers of students, looking at special education numbers, analyzing current staffing, and to see whether or not we're meeting the needs of the students. Principals and administrators are going to make recommendations regarding the building needs and instructions and programs. We're going to review mandated costs. Now, again, what we spoke about was that, we are looking at the personnel and the overall numbers. However, the staff that we are keeping, we are fixed in regards to what their salary and benefits are going to be for the 2021-22 school year. This is governed by what was negotiated in their contract. Tuition costs, that's a mandated cost. If it's driven by their IEP that the student is placed out of district, those tuition costs are mandated. We are required to pay them. We are required to have an audit. We're required to have insurance. We're required, we're not necessarily required to have an attorney, but we are required, to consult, especially in regards to certain legal matters. And we are going to have legal fees within the 21-22 school year. We're required to have testing services. Obviously, we have transportation costs that are mandated, energy costs that we are required to have. So what is left to consider? That was the fixed cost of the budget. What are the soft costs? Those are school supplies, textbooks, professional development, maintenance, supplies for the departments. Again, these are areas that you might see as getting cut during the budget development process, simply because we can make the cuts there. It's not something that we necessarily want to do, but again, you have to go back to the first point. Revenues have to equal expenses. So again, what does this all mean? What is it when I'm saying we're projecting out? What are we looking at? When I'm speaking about salary, which again, salary and benefits are about 75% of the budget. Again, the biggest portion of the salary part are teachers. We are reviewing enrollment and trends, seeing whether or not enrollment's increasing or decreasing, looking at the configuration of the students, determining the needs for the student population for next year. We might have it where the student population is decreasing, but we are approaching the board saying we need to add staff. That's due to the fact that certain classified students need more attention, might need more aides, would need smaller class sizes. Once we sort of determined the staffing for the 2021-22 school year, then it's basically plugging those staff members onto our salary guide. Anybody that we're hiring that's new is going to be at BA step 1. Staff that we're retaining, we are going to be moving them up on the salary guide. For those that are not on the salary guide, we're going to assume some sort of increase. Again, it's an assumption. It's something that's budgeted. It's not something that is required to do in terms of a salary increase. It's not that, hey, listen, you budgeted for a 2% increase or 3% increase, do it. If the employee doesn't merit the increase, we do not provide the increase again. But at the beginning, the whole process of the budget is sort of setting things up for the 21-22 school year. Again, benefits tied into expected staffing. Health benefits are based off of a current scattergram of employees, as well as estimated increase in health benefit costs. We can't assume that we're going to know what's going to happen to our staff. So the best thing that we do is say, listen, this is what we have right now in terms of health benefit costs. This is where the staff is relative to health benefits. We have certain number of staff that are receiving, direct 15, that are, family plan, and certain ones are on this new health benefit plan. We have costs associated with each of those individual plans. We also have contributions based off of, Chapter 78, now Chapter 44, of what the employees are paying towards their health benefits. Now, obviously, that is also something that's negotiated. It's part of the contract. But, we come up with it, we're going to come up with an estimate. When I talk about trend analysis, what I'm looking at right now is what's been going on with health benefit costs over the last 5 years. Am I seeing increases on those costs, or am I seeing decreases on them? For a number of years, we were seeing big increases anywhere from 10 to 15%. So we started budgeting, as of January 1st, because that's when the cycle goes through. That's when the new plans go into effect. We would budget for a 10%, 5% increase as of January 1st. Out of district tuition costs, again, it's going to be based on current placements. Are any of the current placements going to be graduating? Expected placements, or special on the special ed side. What we're going to be looking at is, our special ed director is going to be speaking with our 3 sending districts to say, what 8th graders are graduating from your districts that are out of district placements. What students do you have currently that you are, under child study review. Are we going to have any additional placements in the 21-22 school year? In addition, we have to be looking, like I said, at the PCTI numbers. Now, it's somewhat changed a little bit. PCTI now gives us an estimate for what they anticipate their enrollment to be. We take all those students, say this is where these are the individual schools that they're going to. The state gives us what the tuition costs are estimated for the 21-22 school year. So when you get your budget books, you're going to see that we have one student attending, Banyan Academy. Behind that paper, you're going to see that the state of New Jersey has estimated what Banyan Academy's tuition is going to be for the 21-22 school year. That number is what we're going to be utilizing for that placement. Transportation, it is tied in a lot to the out-of-district placement cost, simply because a lot of times with the, especially, PCTI, that school is outside the 2.5 miles for some of our students. For our out-of-district tuitions in regards to special education, a lot of their IEPs have it in there that they are to receive transportation. For anything that's a current contract, we're looking at what the increase is at CPI percentage. CPI is the inflation rate. But again, it's taking the students, when we can. We're obviously putting students that are attending the same placement on the same bus to help defray costs. We do work with the ESC to have our students placed on buses with our neighboring towns to go if we are all going to the same out-of-district placement. Program cost, what has been provided to our principal is a budget, and the budget has a breakdown of spending over the last 10 years. We provide them with a per pupil spending number, and that's based off of current budget along with the ASSA count in terms of what the school district has spent per pupil. We do a slight increase on the per pupil cost because, like everything else, costs are going up. And then we provide the principal, and we basically say, here, listen, here is, the overall budget number that you need to shoot for. Now we let the, and obviously, the superintendent and myself work with them, but we sort of want, because they're kind of the boots on the ground to decide where the money is going to be charged to. Where is it that we need to have a focus on? Do we need to, for instance, replace textbooks? Or are we looking to, put more money into our technology line? What is it that the schools need? I don't want to, and it's, to me, I never want to see that we're increasing an individual line by 2% because that's what the cap is. No, you need to get into there and into the individual expenditure line and tell me what it is that you're spending the money for and why it's needed there. Because again, we're stewards of the taxpayers' money. We want to make sure that the money that we're asking for is being spent in the correct way. Technology, athletics, co-curricular, again, we provide to the supervisors an overall budget. The supervisors are going to dictate to us where they think the money should be going. We're going to have discussions and meetings about this at the administrative level to hear them out. Why is it that the money is going towards this program? Pat will be telling us, these are the investments that we need to be making, in technology. Special education, again, we spoke about the IEPs and expected placements. Again, we're going to budget as needed. Administrative costs, this is something that is somewhat limited. And we're going to, from the state of New Jersey, they don't want to see an increase in per pupil spending from year to year on your administrative cost lines, which means that unless you are experiencing per enrollment increases, you could potentially see that the administrative lines are going down from year to year. Fund 20, this is ESSA, this is your IDEA, this is your non-public funding. Currently we have CARES money in there. But for the IDEA and the ESSA, IDEA is used for special education. ESSA is Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. The state of New Jersey recommends that you utilize 90% of what you receive during the current school year as a budget number for the 21-22 school year. Custodial maintenance security, again, we're going to look at trend analysis. 10 years worth of data. What's been going on these individual lines? You know, for security, what are the contracts that we currently have? You know, we went out to bid on security 2 years ago. What does the contract call for in terms of any sort of increase for the 21-22 school year? If we are going to, when we can, we're going to look to get proposals. You know, if we're doing preventive maintenance, replacing filters, for instance, within the unit vents. You know, we're going to, you know, get a proposal from a vendor. Hey, listen, how much is it going to cost for this amount of filters? You know, we're going to come up with the number of filters that we're going to need for the entire school year. Ask the vendor what the cost is on that. Again, now we're getting the cost in February of 2021. Those costs could change, can and probably will change during the 21-22 school year. So how do we come up with the numbers? Again, whenever possible, we want to get a proposal from the vendor. And this is written wrong, but architects, for instance, are going to provide a budget not for custodial contracts, but for capital projects. You know, if we said to the architect, you know what, we really want to do, you know, the weight room, for instance, or if we wanted to, you know, do work outside on the field, they're going to provide us a budgetary number. It's an estimate, again, a guesstimate, because until we actually go out to bid, we're not going to know what the number is, but they're going to provide us with an overall budget. A vendor, you know, for instance, we've been doing one-to-one initiative. We've been purchasing Chromebooks. Pat has gone out and asked vendors in January and February, hey, listen, we're doing 100, you know, how much is it going to cost for 100 Chromebooks or 200 Chromebooks? Off of that proposal, we're going to budget that number in. Supplies, maintenance, we're going to use trend analysis, like I've spoken about a couple of times. We have 10 years worth of data for each of our budgetary lines. And when, you know, when the board is provided the budget books, which should be at the end of February or beginning of March when we get the state aid numbers released, we're going to provide you the budget books. The budget books are going to show you for each individual line, other than obviously the salary lines for the individual employees and the benefits, as it's, you know, we give you the overall increase over the last 10 years or so. But you're going to see how much we've spent in each of the supply lines, what we spent in the maintenance lines, in the textbook lines. So you can understand why it is that we're looking to budget the numbers at what we are. You know, we're going to look at it, you know, are the numbers sort of all over the place? So are we looking at what the average spending is? Are costs going up consistently? Are they going down? So we're going to be collecting, and this is what's been going on right now. We've provided to the supervisors, the principal and whatnot in December, all of the paperwork, their worksheets that, like I said, that had all of that information on there, the budget that they're shooting for, all of the background, the history on each of the lines. They're working on that right now. They're going to be providing it to us. In addition, we're working on like I said, the maintenance lines, the custodial lines and things like that. We compile the expense side of the budget. What comes next is the revenue side. We're going to, for right now, you know, in January and February, we're going to work on state aid, assuming, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm going to assume that it's flat, but I'm more likely than not going to assume that there's going to be some sort of cut in state aid. Again, we spoke about the federal aid, 90%. Interest calculated by trend analysis and projection, although the interest rates are, you know, the interest that the school collects is not too much. Tuition based on current expected contracts and trend analysis, you're going to come up with the estimated revenues exclusive of taxes. So then we're going to calculate the tax number, because we're going to have what the expense side is, the rough draft of the expense side. We're going to subtract out all these other revenues, and we're going to come up with the local taxes needed to support the budget. Hopefully the taxes are, you know, zero, or that they're under zero, they're negative, or that they're not at cap, or they're not above cap. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of times they are above cap. So what is it that we can look to do? We can look to cut expenses. You know, we've done things like shared services, we've increased efficiencies. You know, you'll see within your budget book that based on trend analysis, you know, it looks, you know, we should be budgeting $150,000, for instance, in our maintenance account line. However, to balance out the budget, we might have had to cut $10,000 or $15,000. What we start to do is take risks throughout the budget. And what that means is what I just said, that, hey, listen, the trend analysis shows that, 7 out of 10 years, we spent at least $170,000. And 3 of the years, maybe we only spent $150,000 in this line. We're going to balance out the budget, say that it's $150,000, not because we want to, but because we have to balance the budget. Some other ways that we can balance out the budget is increasing our revenues, tapping into our surplus, tapping into our reserves. What we have done once or twice while I've been here is actually gone above the 2% number, utilizing waivers. The state of New Jersey says that, listen, if certain costs are going up, and certain costs do go up more than 2%, the state of New Jersey realizes that. It says to you, you can increase the taxes based on these certain costs, things like energy costs, health benefit costs. If, for instance, you had enrollment that was increasing drastically, and you as a school district had to hire additional staff, the assumption would be if the enrollment was going, it's increasing drastically, you are going to have to increase staffing, so you are able to go above the 2% number. Again, it's something that we're not looking to do, but again, it's just an option in our arsenal. If expenses need to be cut, cuts are considered and done in consultation with the administrative staff, finance committee, and board of education, superintendent's office, and the business office. When we get to the budget approval process, that's when the revenues equal the expenses, revenues equal expenses within the TAP constraints, and we have what's called a preliminary budget. We're going to present that budget to the board and the taxpayers in March. Board's going to vote on that budget. Now, we're going to be talking about our budget, pretty much from now through, probably the end of April. But like I said, this is the balanced budget. This is when the revenues equal the expenditures. And that's really going to be dependent upon when we have the state aid numbers, which, like I said, is not going to be until the end of February, beginning of March. After the board votes on it, the preliminary budget is going to be sent down to the state of New Jersey. We also send down a bunch of other paperwork with it. County is going to review it. They usually ask a couple of questions. Once everything's sort of sorted out there, preliminary budget is going to become the district's final budget. Final budget is again presented to the public and voted on by the Board of Education. Changes can still occur at this point. I mean, we can make changes up to the board votes on that final budget. I mean, we do have to have a final budget approved, but you can make changes even at the night of that final budget presentation. When the board approves that final budget, it becomes the approved budget for the next school year. There is no longer a vote. We did used to have a vote in April on our school budgets. There was a change in the law that allowed school boards, if they move their elections to November, and that the final budget would forego voter approval as long as they fell within the constraints. Our school district has an election of its budget in November, so that we do not need to worry about having an April election. What the board can choose to do, and this is putting it out to the taxpayers, is a second question. That is something that can be voted on. That is a budget item, but that would be something that's voted on in November. Second questions are additional spending proposals. They're voted on separately from the budget. It's called the second question because the budget vote used to be the first question. One of the important things to note for second questions, especially for our school district, is it has to be for expenses that aren't going to be incurred until after the election. It also can't be for expenses that are needed for the thorough and efficient education of our students. You can't put something that is required in that budget. You can't force the taxpayers to have to vote yes for it. If something is voted down in a second question, it cannot become part of the regular budget for the rest of that year. So even if money did become available, you're not able to make it a part of your budget because, again, the taxpayers have come out and said that they did not want that as part of the budget. So that is the end of my presentation. Sorry for talking so long today. Like I said, we are in the midst of the budget schedule. The next couple of meetings, we're going to be having discussions on different aspects of the budget. The next meeting, I believe we're going to have a discussion about capital projects and personnel. within, I think within February, we will have at least I would say a rough draft of the budget. By the end of February, beginning of March, we will have to the Board of Education the budget book, which is a very, if you think the audit is bad, that budget book is much worse. It's a lot of paper, but again, it's sort of what I like to do is provide all of the thinking of how the budget is put together to everybody, so that we're very transparent here. We don't want it to be that we show all of our work. We're showing how the budget's put together. You might not like the numbers as they're presented, but you'll understand the reasoning behind them. So again, this is the beginning of the budget process. So thank you guys for listening to that. And does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, John, on the health benefits, the changeover from Chapter 78 to Chapter 44,
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of talk, a lot of districts, some districts have saved money, a lot of districts have found that it's costing them more with the change in the contributions. Has our benefits consultant, have you been able to work with them yet, or are we still in the process of analyzing where we are, whether we're in a plus or a minus?
We did a preliminary analysis of it. We reviewed it. We had a couple of eyes look at it. It looks like there's a minimal savings to the school district. I think the school districts that were experiencing losses with it were in the private plans. For the ones that are in the state health benefit plan, there did seem to be some savings. It's not a significant savings because, again, the Board of Education has done a lot of negotiating. And, if you recall, our last couple of negotiations have had some changes on the health benefit side. So there was minimal savings. There was actually something that was released just today from the state of New Jersey in regards to an Excel spreadsheet that is now required for us to input the data into, that I believe will generate whether or not a more definitive number for the savings on that.
Thank you.
Any other
All right.
questions?
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sarapilia. Appreciate it, as always. Someone like to move prior minutes? So move. First by Hilton. Have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Barca. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mrs. Fusca, Miss Eric. I think I put her to sleep. Is she there?
Oh, John.
Bridget, you're on mute.
Muted.
Yes. No, you almost put me to sleep. I'm sorry.
Miss
Yeah.
Baez
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. At this time, we'll open the floor to the public. I'll take a motion to open the floor to the public
John,
On
open the hearing.
on agenda items only.
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fisher. Roll call?
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Miss Baez, Miss Eric,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. At this time, if you'd like to speak on agenda items only, please use the raise hand button.
Mr.
Pat, let me know if
Yab,
you see anything.
yes, Mr. Yab would like to address the board.
Mr. Yob, you have the floor. Just a reminder that there is a 3-minute cap.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I was looking at the agenda and I couldn't help but notice under 8.1, the superintendent goals, it mentions implementing the district reopening plan, but there's no mention of a discussion or a vote on whether it's safe to open. And I bring that up because I'm sure that you're aware that 3 districts within 5 minutes of us have reopened after New Year's, and they're currently closed because they tried and failed despite their best efforts to have a safe reopening. One of our basketball teams made it about a week before needing the quarantine. Approximately 70% of our students' families have decided that the timing's not right to return to school. Now, a few weeks ago, I was in school with a small group of teachers, and we were invited by administration to look at readiness. And Mr. Panzeri, you were there as well. And I think the administration of Building and Grounds has done a great job at setting up the social distancing for the school. I'm not trying to say that the school building's not ready. I'm suggesting that the world is still not ready, because at best we're still at May levels of COVID, and no one would have dared reopen in May. There's a 50% more transmissible strain of COVID that's creeping into New Jersey. The CDC thinks that within a couple weeks it's going to be the dominant strain in the country. And finally, the vaccine rollout in New Jersey has been excruciatingly slow, and many people that would gladly get the vaccine simply can't. All the official and unofficial communication from the school lately seems to be about indicating that there's a hell or high water approach to reopening. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because this is us preparing to barrel into a headlong fog of disease and uncertainty. Meanwhile, there's all these warning signs around us saying, don't go that way, not yet. And I suppose that brings me to just a short series of questions about the agenda item. Does the board plan to discuss and vote on the efficacy of the reopening of the building in this current climate? And when? And if not, why? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yob. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak on agenda items only?
Yes, Ms. Hedges would like to speak.
Okay, Ms. Hedges, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Hi, thank you very much. Good evening. I too would like to speak about this reopening. I want to talk about my son's high school. It's implemented a hybrid model in late fall, and the only thing consistent about it is its inconsistency. About every 2 weeks, due to COVID cases, maintenance issues, and or staff shortages, the school has had to change schedules, reassign teachers, and move whole classrooms. And those are logistical issues. Instructional time consists of pockets of asynchronous periods throughout the day due to lack of staffing. And with so many teachers needing to take leaves of absence and no qualified substitutes available, work gets assigned but not taught by administration. He has had at least 8 new teachers in the last 3 months. Teachers have stood their classes up and missed extra help sessions, unable to keep up with their ever-changing routines. We watch as grades rise and fall depending on what is going on in the building and what adults are in the classrooms each week. When we ask what can be done, the answer they give us is COVID. Aware of his struggles to balance ADHD, anxiety, and his academic goals, and really believing this was the best chance for his success, my son was determined to make the hybrid situation work, and we were on board. However, with the past 3 months as they've been, and his high school closed since Christmas, and weekly emails saying, sorry, not this week, maybe next, he's starting to rethink this, preferring maybe comfort in the consistency of a fully virtual plan. And each time I watch my son try to navigate this continued uncertainty he faces at his high school, I'm reminded of how fortunate we have been at Manchester to have remained fully virtual all this time. It's given us continued opportunities to hone the craft of virtual teaching while creating inclusive environments for all of our students all together. We discuss poetry and we even read plays out loud. I know my students. We recognize and read each other's facial expressions, even though we haven't met face to face. They trust me and share their dreams and worries with me. And I feel lucky to have been able to form that bond in these uncertain times. Meanwhile, we're seeing and hearing our neighboring high schools opening up and closing and changing their daily routines, just like my son's school. These schools have been trying to make this work for months unsuccessfully. The students aren't getting more of their classroom time. They're getting less, whether they're in the classroom or at home. It's not their fault. Their plans are made public just as good as ours. But this virus has other plans and it can spread and now mutate faster than our plans can adapt. Manchester has succeeded where other high schools have failed because we accepted the limitations needed to keep us safe in the high school setting. We are maintaining our educational integrity and matching our pacing, providing our students with certainty that no matter what is going on in the world, we are open for business. We have school every day. We are working, and we will continue to work whether we are able to meet their needs, wherever we are. What makes us think that we'll be successful where all these other high schools around us have failed in spite of their months of trying? Are we naive enough to believe that now, with numbers on the rise and all these high schools remaining closed and operating virtually, that this will work for us? Having weathered this storm with grace thus far and with hope and promise on the horizon, where has the sudden disregard for the sanctity of education come from, that we'd risk implementing a hybrid plan amidst the slew of failed ones? Why would we jump ship so close to the shore, sacrificing education and putting health of our students and ourselves at risk, just to say, well, we tried?
I'm sorry I interrupt you, but
Thank
your
you.
3 minutes is up.
Done.
Anybody else would like to speak?
Yes, Miss Melanie Tischler.
Ms. Tischler, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Tischler Quinn, and for the past 18 years, I have been the school psychologist here at Manchester. Since March 2020, I have attended these board meetings regularly, but have not spoken because it's very difficult for me. However, as I was helping my son work on his Martin Luther King project of interpreting the quote, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends," I realized I can no longer remain silent. This pandemic is our enemy, and I want my friends, the staff at Manchester, to know that I spoke up with them. I have, and I know everyone else has, adapted and done everything that was thrown at us since working virtually from home. Speaking for myself, I feel I've been effective at managing all the duties that are asked of me, being at home while supervising my intern. In fact, we are more accessible to parents and students. I was provided with my own special phone number, and students and parents were able to contact me instantly via text messages and voice. I have made myself available through lunches, at nights, and weekends. I go that extra mile. Many parents are very thankful that we're so available in these times. I have students that are thriving in this forum with all the extra attention and help they are provided through the team and all of their amazing teachers. We currently have a much higher attendance rate at parent IEP meetings and regular meetings than we did when they were held in person. You are asking us to come back to what? To do the job in the same exact way, but just be present in the building? Meetings are not able to be held in person. All contact will be virtual. I'll be sitting in my freezing cold, windy room, bundled up in coats and gloves, especially on a day like today when it was 29 degrees. How will students be able to concentrate? How will I be able to concentrate in these conditions? For me, this is creating a huge childcare issue for my family. My husband and I have been making things work since the start of the pandemic. He works 12 hours a day. Both my kids are 100% virtual and seemingly not going back in person until at least March. I have had to choose between my two children to get one of them assistance they need due to significant costs. We have nothing left, but now you're asking me to either leave my other special needs child home alone or take unpaid leave so he is safe and monitored. I'm being denied my request to work from home for 2 days without a reason, even though I'd be able to do my job effectively, the same way that I've been doing all school year and would be doing if I was in the building. I have an intern who's even there with the total of 15 kids on my caseload, so maybe 7 each cohort that would need some type of help. Somebody will always be there. It is sad that we are more worried about the very few percentage of students who are coming back as opposed to the ones staying at home. I'm being asked to put my family in an unsafe or financially crippling situation in order for what? To do the same exact job I'm doing effectively, but be in a room in the building all by myself? I'm being asked to take care of all the students with special needs, but neglect my own son and his special needs as a child on the spectrum. And I'm going to leave with that.
Ms. Tischler, your time is
Perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Pagani, you have anybody else?
Miss Amy Hughes would like to speak.
Ms. Hughes, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Good evening. I want to thank the Board of Education for all of your hard work during this trying time and for giving me the opportunity to voice my concerns. Even though I am anxious to get back to life as we knew it, I do not think we should be returning to the school right now. First, I see no educational benefit to having teachers physically present in the building. Our classes and lessons will remain virtual with no added learning value. The procedures that will be required to engage at home and in-class students, however, will take away from our already shortened class periods, resulting in less learning time. Second, I have seen firsthand via my daughter's district the complications that arise when contact tracing disrupts the flow of learning. As a parent, I receive daily emails documenting all possible COVID cases, and there hasn't been a single day when the school was 100% clear. Every time a teacher is absent, which is frequent for a myriad of reasons, the students who do attend school are corralled into the auditorium to sit idly by. It's gotten so bad, the school finally went fully virtual this past week. They did not have the vision that this board has shown since September, and they clearly regret it. Third, and you'll have to excuse my numbers as I am not a math teacher, if there are approximately 830 students in the MRHS community and approximately 230 are planning to come to the building, that means there are approximately 600 parents who do not believe the school is ready for their children. Why then do you believe it is safe for us? Finally, and I realize my last plea is a personal one. When my mother died in April, I made the decision to move in with my 80-year-old father in hopes of making his life a little easier. Right now, his name sits on the waiting list for the COVID vaccine. They estimate he will be able to get it in about 6 to 8 weeks. Your foresight and logical decisions have brought us this far and kept so many precious lives safe. You have done what so many other schools are realizing now they should have done back in September. You put the well-being of the MRHS community at the top of your priority list, and it has kept us all protected. And so I ask you, for the sake of our community, and frankly, for my father, stay the course that has been so successful and continue to keep us sheltered at home until the vaccine is more readily available. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Pat, next person, please.
Mr. Rick Marino.
Mr. Marino, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Good evening, and thank you to the Board of Education for allowing me to speak tonight. I'd also like to commend Mr. Coviello for his leadership in developing our reopening plan, and also to personally thank him for his mentorship. I also wish to thank my colleagues at Manchester for leading the way in remote education and for their dedication to the students and families at Manchester. I'd also like to thank Mr. Banta for his donation of the trombone for his students, for our students, and I'd like to hear him play it as well. I wish to speak tonight about why at this time I cannot support the reopening of the building for in-person instruction. I believe we have an excellent plan to reopen, and like everyone, I want things to go back to the way they were, and for students to be in the classroom. Unfortunately, I believe it's just not the right time for students and faculty to return to the building. I think when we consider all factors, most folks would agree that at this time, continuing to be vigilant and remaining safe is the best course of action. Our students' families have overwhelmingly agreed with this assessment, with 2 out of 3 students opting to remain remote. I would assert to you that this amounts to a decision by our community that in-person learning is currently unsafe. I would also assert that it is an affirmation that our remote instruction is effective and, in my belief, the most effective way of delivering education as the pandemic continues to affect our community. While thinking about what I might say tonight, I began to consider an analogy of a hobby of mine, which is building tube amplifiers. And they function fine within a spec of plus or 20%. They are resilient systems. However, when an issue arises and too many components go out of spec, the horses start to pull in different directions. Clearly, systems work best when all of the components of a system are working together. This is why I believe that the most equitable decision we as educators can make is to dedicate ourselves to providing the highest level of remote instruction possible. I believe the remote instruction that I'm currently offering my students exceeds anything I can do in the building at this time. I'm surrounded by 6 or 7 computers or devices which allow me to do attendance, monitor student work, interact with my students, play music, and keep students engaged. If we return to the building, we've been advised to use only school-issued Chromebooks for school business. This will greatly diminish my ability to engage my students at a time when we are just beginning to fully utilize the technology available to us to create music in a digital environment. I look forward to seeing our students and working alongside my faculty, friends, and colleagues. However, I believe the community has made it clear that now is not the right time. This is why I believe that the Manchester community is best served by our faculty continuing to develop and deliver innovative remote instruction for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Marino. Your time is up. Take the next person, please.
MRHS Cohen.
Ms. Cohen, you have the floor. Your time will start now.
Hi, good evening. So I lost a family member 2 days ago, ultimately from COVID. This virus is not a joke. It may not kill a healthy person, old or young, but the long-term lingering side effects are still detrimental. And this virus is still very relevant in our community. This is my 21st year working at Manchester as a physical education and health teacher. I love my job, I love my coworkers, and I love my students. My experience while working from home has been very successful and a gratifying one. I feel my students are moving more, exercising harder, and we participate in mindful practice, AKA yoga, weekly. This will all diminish when we return to school. We will be without any equipment and even questioning if we really should be or want to be exercising on the floor. All of the teachers at Manchester are working harder than ever. We care about our students, but we also care about ourselves and families. I personally have a childcare issue when or if we return to school. My 3 young children will be out of childcare for 2 days of the week, since I was also denied accommodations to work from home those 2 days. So I can continue to do my job 100% and even better as if we were in school. And I could also care for my children. Their father will have to go from working full-time to a part-time position and ultimately have to take a pay cut, which will affect our financial well-being. These days we're living in are far from normal. If we stay remote, I feel that would be the most beneficial for our students and staff while keeping us all safe and continuing this excellent education that we have started from the start. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Next person who would like to speak, Pat?
Mr. Mark Winkler.
Mr. Winkler, you have the floor. Your time will start now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mark Winkler. I'm a 14th year teacher at Manchester. I teach history. And the plan to reopen is carefully drawn, trying to do the best possible under very, very difficult circumstances. The big problem is the date we're going to implement it. Now is not the time. It was way back on November 2nd when the board last considered a date for going back to in person. And you can't see the future as no one can. The board decided at that time to revisit the issue in February. Back then in November, when the board voted, the new COVID rate was 1751 per day in New Jersey per the CDC track. It's now 2.5 times higher. As of January 20th, it was 4,582 per day. A week ago it was 6,922 per day, dramatically higher than it was when you last visited the issue. Now's not the time to go back. Some other data. Out of our student body, more than 2/3 have opted not to return in person, to keep on learning virtually as they've been doing. They opted to do what's best for themselves and their families. Here's some other data from the CDC. They've done calculations for risk of death for people who get COVID. They use the 18 to 19 year age group as the baseline with a score of 1. For those 5 to 17 years old, the odds of death are 16 times lower than for 18 to 29-year-olds. Even so, with that lower risk, 2/3 of our families figure for them it's best not to come back to the school. For people 50 to 64 years of age, I'm 64. The death rate, if you get COVID, it's 480 times higher than it is for kids high school age. Our staff is at grievously higher risk, but we don't get to opt out. We have to go back. We have to take the risk, and not just ourselves, our family members at home. This is serious stuff. When I was a young man, I was in the Army, and we sometimes had to do things that involve risk. I never had to do anything especially dangerous. Some things could have gone badly, but whenever we had to do something like that, we knew our leadership was calling on us to do it for a good reason. And with that knowledge, our morale was high, and we did what we had to do. That's not the situation here. If we have to go back, I will, as will my colleagues, but it's not for educational benefit, it's for a detriment. Our students have a routine, it works. We're all working harder than ever before, and we're making it work. It's not perfect, but it's as best it can be under the circumstances. If we go back, It's going to be worse. We're going to have disruption in the classroom. We're going to have to watch online, Go Guardian, kids coming in, kids going out, bathroom breaks, online bathroom checks. Are they available or not? We've built a rapport with our students, and now we'll have to be the enforcers for social discipline. It's going to be harmful. It's not going to be helpful. And right now, when the vaccine's in sight, to put us back now, it's going to war with the vaccine when we don't have the ammunition. If we wait a little while, we'll have the ammunition to win. I'm a history nut. At the end of World War I, hours before the armistice, the ceasefire, some officers ordered an
Thank you,
attack.
Mr. Winkler. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms.
Pat,
Tara Mortet.
Thank you. Ms. Morset, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Thank you. I'd like to also thank the administration and the Board of Ed, as my colleagues, many have said, for making such smart decisions, keeping the students and their families, the staff and their families safe by keeping us out of school for all this time. But we're so close, as Mr. Winkler has said. The vaccine is here. We're just waiting. We're all on lists. And once that vaccine, we're able to have it, we will all be so much safer and protected. Numbers are going up. The new strain that's very contagious is coming in. It just seems like not the right time to come back when we're so close. My two daughters are both nurses dealing with COVID patients on a daily basis. And what they have seen and experienced, we don't get a lot of details, but we get calls saying, please don't go out of the house, please stay in. And that's what we have done. Our life has been shaped by this disease. And my husband and I have basically sacrificed a lot to stay in and stay healthy. We didn't see our children. They don't come to the house. We can't see our parents, but we're almost to the finish line. And for everyone in our community, I feel it's really important that we wait until this vaccination is available and we're protected, and then we come back fully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Mara Hirschfeld.
Ms. Hirschfeld, you have the floor. Your time starts now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, hi. Thank you for letting me speak. Dr. Mark Toback, the superintendent of schools in our neighboring town of Wayne, where my 4 children were educated, recommended that the entire district of Wayne operate under a fully remote schedule. They will be revisiting that decision in late February. The reasoning behind this is the rapidly rising rate of COVID infections. Dr. Toback said, we've consulted with our infectious disease experts, and he said that we are solidly in a bad situation and will remain in a bad situation for some time until the vaccine gets a hold sometime in the next few months, end quote. Some other points he made is that more and more students were switching to remote learning. In their 2 high schools, one of them was 61% opting out and the other one was 49% opting out. And by the way, our opt-out rate is even higher than that. Also in Wayne, they said many students are not submitting their health screening, which is requiring nurses and administrators to spend a lot of time tracking down students. And finally, he said that staffing hotspots in several schools were creating an inability to cover teacher absences. So I question the judgment of reopening at this time when we're in a good groove, where teaching and learning is happening. I know people want to go back to normal. They want kids in school, and I want that too. I love my job. I can't wait to go back to my colorful classroom and use the fancy new Promethean board, but I'm willing to wait a little bit longer for the safety of myself, my family, my community, my colleagues, my students, and their families. Our regional high school is not like the other local elementary schools. Our students hail from 8 different towns. Our students will be all over the building. They're not sitting at one desk in the same room all day. As employees in the district, our financial security is connected to our employment, but I submit that our health and the health of our families cannot and should not be connected to our employment. As board members, you were elected to be fiscally and educationally responsible to the community. Would you have ever thought in a million years that you would be expected to make decisions with such serious health consequences for the teachers and staff in the district? With all due respect, I don't think we're all qualified to make that decision. School medical professionals are disagreeing with our own personal health care providers. So how do we know who is right? Do we want to find out, God forbid, that the school's advisors were wrong? There are vaccines being distributed, and hopefully every teacher who wants one can get one soon. We should continue working remotely through the winter, let the experts guide us, and reevaluate the decision to open in person when it's safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hirschfield. Next person, Pat.
I have Mr. Mike Gasiliak.
Mr. Kasiliak, the floor is yours, and your time will start now.
Good evening, and thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mike, and I work in the technology department. I'd like to speak to the same topics that my colleagues have so far. As one of the staff members who has remained in the building on a somewhat normal schedule through the majority of the pandemic, I've seen firsthand as Manchester changes throughout the year. The administrators and the buildings and grounds crew have put on a Herculean effort to retrofit the building with the policies and equipment to bring the students back to school. I am very proud to have worked alongside them, and I am very proud of the work that we have done to actualize the vision of a hybrid learning model. I am certain that if the pandemic were somewhat under control, if our staff and vulnerable community members were vaccinated or being vaccinated in the foreseeable future, I am certain that if the highly infectious variant of COVID-19 from the UK were not beginning to spread in the tri-state area, that the plan that we've worked so hard to put into place to return the students to school safely would work beautifully. Unfortunately, the virus and the circumstances surrounding it have not cooperated with our plan, and all of those hypotheticals are just that, hypotheticals. Yesterday, there were 5,439 confirmed cases in the state of New Jersey. The number of people who found out they were infected yesterday is nearly equivalent to the total population of Prospect Park. Additionally, the vaccine rollout has hit roadblocks both in terms of logistics and production. Many of our staff and many members of our community will continue to go without access for the foreseeable future. Furthermore, the new hyper-infectious variant of COVID, estimated as being roughly 50% more infectious, is quietly spreading through the tri-state area. 2 new cases were found in Connecticut today. How many weren't? Given this reality, I believe we should follow in the steps of many other New Jersey districts in remaining closed, at least for a few more weeks. This will buy critical time for case numbers to potentially drop with the end of the holiday surge and the coming of spring, tens of millions of vaccines to be produced and distributed, and the hospitals currently buckling under the strain of the pandemic to stabilize their equipment and staffing levels. The fact of the matter is that to reopen now will imperil the lives and health of all who set foot in this building, as well as the lives and health of their contacts, their husbands and wives, sons and daughters, parents and grandparents. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next person, Pat.
I have Mr. James Hornby.
Mr. Hornby, you have the floor. Your time will start now.
Good evening, members of the Board of Ed. Obviously, I'm also speaking on this topic. I'm not going to focus so much on the health and stats on that. Obviously, those have been brought up a lot, but looking over the superintendent goals, I see for professional goal number 1, one of his actions, one of Mr. Labisco's actions is to be able to pivot between hybrid and virtual learning with minimal learning interruptions. And when I think about it, just going from virtual to hybrid interrupts the learning greatly. As my colleague, Ms. Hughes, pointed out, the instruction method is going to stay the same. The process, the delivery is going to stay the same. But let me paint you this picture. If a kid wakes up 5 minutes before 8 o'clock and wants to have breakfast, he can right now with virtual instruction. In the building, nope, no food. What if he wants to go to the bathroom during class? Okay, if they're in the building, there's going to be a huge line. It's going to be a virtual line. And more likely than not, they're not going to be able to go when they need to go. In terms of socializing, I don't know what opportunities they're going to have to socialize that they wouldn't have already virtually. there's the 5 minutes that they're going to be between classes where they're let go in bits and pieces. But, you know, they've got 5 minutes in between classes. And then when you get to class, you know, we have 30 minutes to teach a 43-minute lesson. So there's really no time for teachers to even allow them to socialize for any bit. And then as for their lunch period, where they'll either be in the cafeteria or the auditorium because they can't eat, I'm going to quote a student who spoke up at the Wayne Board of Ed meeting last week, who said, "I've had to sit in the auditorium for 2 periods, 6 feet away from all my classmates, not being able to talk to them and not being able to do anything because they can't hear me through the masks and the fans that are going on. The rooms are alternating cold and hot because the windows are open and the heat's blasting. It's upsetting. It doesn't really matter whether you're 6 feet away from someone or 6 miles away. The experience is still the same." Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hornby. Pat will take the next person that'd like to speak.
I have Miss Carolyn Canvasser.
Ms. Canvasser, you have the floor. Your time will start now.
Thank you. I'm Carolyn Canvasser, and it's my 13th year as a special education English teacher at Manchester. I also serve as the coordinator of the intervention and referral services team. I'm speaking to you today because I wanted to let you know that this afternoon I found out that my request for medical accommodations, which had previously been approved in August, had now been denied. And it was the school's position now that I will be able to report to work this coming Monday with accommodations in place. Although I'm thankful for the lengths that Mr. Coviello and Mr. Labisco are going through to try to make me comfortable in the environment, the accommodations suggested still require me, who has several different medical conditions making me high risk, to travel the hallways and to share rooms with other teachers. The offer to provide protective panels surrounding my desk is not as protective as it sounds when another person has just left that desk and I now have to enter. I now have very little time to meet with my doctor to review the accommodations proposed, assess my risk, and determine if I will need to take a leave of absence. The reason I share my personal dilemma with you tonight is because it directly relates to the students that I service, both as a classroom teacher and as the coordinator of the intervention and referral services. If a medical leave becomes necessary for me now, even though the majority of the students will not be in the classroom and will be learning remotely, they will then be learning via either a substitute or through somebody else. They won't have the teacher that they have formed a relationship with. And in many of the cases, because I'm a special education teacher, I've been working with some of these students for years. In fact, some of them 4 years. It's just my position that they would benefit more from having their classroom teacher with them in this virtual reality rather than having substitutes. This also brings to mind my own students. I have 3 high school age students that go to 2 different high schools, and they are also experiencing, I mean, they've been opted out and remain all virtual, but I am watching the struggle that the teachers are going through and the confusion between when school has to immediately switch from virtual back to hybrid and back the other direction, which this previous time, the school was only able to remain open for 2 days before reclosing again. My concern just surrounds mostly the fact that we're going to have a lot of situations where students are going to end up with substitutes because of medical leaves and people having to take time to figure out major life decisions now that certain accommodations have been denied. I do believe that we would all be better off waiting until after we are able to secure the vaccinations and the science is there to support the reopening. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Miss Bernadette Orsita.
Ms. Orsita, you have the floor and your time will start now.
Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Bernadette Orsita. I'm a Spanish teacher here at Manchester for 12 years. I too am concerned mostly about the medical situation, because I think that if we wait until we are at least vaccinated, I was one of the first people that signed up for the vaccination, excuse me, so that I could get back to work and not have any trouble. I watched Governor Murphy tonight say that teachers were going to be the next ones vaccinated. I am scared to go into the school building not vaccinated for my own medical issues and for those of my own family here at home. I also have three young men who are high school students, and they go to Lakeland, and we have been on this back and forth. We don't, because I kept them home to keep us all COVID safe. I did get a swimming pool because of COVID, thank you. But that's the only good thing that came out of COVID so far for us. We haven't seen friends, family, holidays, celebrations. You know, some people know that my husband had some illnesses that were very difficult for us. So we've just been trying to protect our family. I really ask that you reconsider you know, where we're going with this, because this is truly something that we are, you know, in need of your help for. And I do want to add, you know, you guys did an amazing job, the team, everybody that worked together on opening it. I look at it, it's amazing, but I'm still scared. And I do thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Orsita.
I have Edwin C.
Mr. Edwin C., you have the floor. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Hello, my name is Eddie Calandres. I'm the father of two students at Manchester, senior and a sophomore. And I would just like to begin by saying that, and I've said this before, that I think we have some of the best teachers in the state here at our school teaching our kids. And with that being said, I want to say that my sons, both of them, are absolutely doing terrible with virtual classes. I had one that was an honor roll student that now I have to struggle and fight, both my wife and I, just to keep him engaged because he is not taken to virtual. And then the flip side is I had a son who was more or less a mediocre student now, who for some reason is doing fantastic. And knowing my kids, and if teachers know their students, you know that just can't happen. Both of my kids are disengaged. They're just not doing well. I know there's never going to be a perfect solution to this. Nobody's ever going to be fully satisfied. And there are certain accommodations that have to be made for people, for teachers, staff. But my kids are not doing well. And I'm just a little surprised that as of this point, I am the first parent to speak in this. I don't know, 25th person or so. And I'm the first parent to even talk. There are concerns and nothing's ever going to be perfect. I just hope that we don't wait until the next best thing or the next vaccine or the next wave drops, because we will be waiting quite a long time. Life is going to be different forever for all of us here. And we're either going to move forward or we're going to do nothing and sit in fear and stay paralyzed. I think we're all better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Edwin.
I have Mr. Leonardo Aristimuno.
Okay, Mr. Aristimuno, you have the floor and your time will start now.
Thank you. My name is Leo Aristimuno, and I am happy to be speaking. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the board, and thank you in particular to the administration for really being done this Herculean task of putting together a plan that is outstanding and very careful, very well thought out, and very well executed. I do agree with many of my colleagues. I want to thank them for expressing so clearly all of our concerns, and their concerns for the teachers, their concerns for the community, their concerns for our students, of course, and their concerns for our own individual families. We have pivoted. we have stepped up to the plate. We have adapted. We have done really fantastic learning with extensive professional development, incredible resources that we have put together individually as teachers and as a faculty, as a whole team. It's an honor to be a part of that team, and it's great to see how well we have adapted to teaching online. I do believe that shifting to a in-person situation will tremendously hamper these great advances that we've made, and will really reverse the learning. It'll make things even worse as we're limited in time, as we have faced a number of logistics that put that threaten our health and our whole community. I want to take a moment to say something that has not been mentioned. We have spoken, many of my colleagues have mentioned the higher risk that are borne by people who are older. The death and hospitalization rates go up exponentially with age and with pre-existing conditions, of which I personally have two. My family also has conditions. And although it is sometimes a challenge to speak about this, I want to bring to the table the racial inequities of COVID-19 and quote a recent research at the New York Times, published with the New York Times. Black and Latino people are being harmed by the virus at a higher rate. Latino and African American residents of the United States have been 3 times as likely to become infected as their white neighbors, according to data. Black and Latino people have been nearly twice as likely to die from the virus as white people, the data shows. I think it is our duty, it is our concern, our humanity, to be extra vigilant to our population, with a population that is nearly 80% minority, African American and Latino. It is of particular importance that we pay special attention and we err on the side of safety, on the side of health, so that we can take care of all of our students and their families and their entire community. We can take care of ourselves as a people and as a community. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you. Next person, Pat.
Mr. Panzer, I want to circle back to Edwin C., as I think we had some audio issues.
Oh, absolutely. Mr. Edwin C., you may continue.
I don't think I got cut off, and if I do, I'm not sure where. So I just want to say that, once again, I think that my kids, or I know my kids would do better in environment where they were in school as opposed to virtual, because they are struggling. My son, my senior, is just doing terrible at school right now, and it's not working for him. My sophomore, he's so much change, so much different. There's nothing that resembles traditional schooling to them right now, other than the fact that they're simply doing schoolwork at home, sitting in front of a computer. Once again, nothing's going to be the same for any of us at this point going forward, but I wish the best for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Elizabeth House.
Miss House, good evening. Your 3 minutes will start now.
Hi, my name's Aurora House. I'm a junior at Manchester, and from a student's point of view, I'd just like to say it's not easy. I was an A to high B student, and now I'm not. It makes me very upset because I strive to do the best. I feel as though we are just making excuses to not open. We are going to have to go back. We have to go back to normal. We can't live in fear. In September, I didn't want to go back. I was scared to. My grandma is at high risk, but we've talked to her, and she's ready to start to go back to normal too. Also, my brother. I can't explain how much I love my brother, but since we have left school, he doesn't talk to anyone. He is sad and living in a bubble. He is someone who needs to go back and see people. After the terrible loss of the student at PCTI who committed suicide, I think our mental health and well-being needs to be thought of also. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurora.
I have Mr. Alex Chinsky.
Mr. Tinsky, you have the floor, and your time will start now.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I know it's been a long night so far. I come to you tonight as a teacher at Manchester, as well as a co-president of the MBA. We all know how frustrating this time of COVID is. And you've heard a lot of different aspects tonight. And I just want to reiterate again that the teaching model associated with hybrid education that all of these schools are, well, at least trying to implement right now, the whole community needs to know that it's not traditional teaching. It's the same high level of virtual teaching that we're doing right now, just in a different location. That, that aspect, we're just not there with COVID the way that it is right now. And we understand the vaccination rollout has significantly underperformed its early promises. But again, why, when we're so close, would we even consider prematurely pulling the proverbial rug out from underneath our feet when the availability for vaccines for our staff should be so close by? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chinsky. Pat, anybody else?
I have not received anything else as of yet.
Okay. Seeing none, take a motion to close the floor. So moved. Moved by Mr. Hilton, Mr. Gonzalez, and second by Mr. Vandermolen. All in favor? All opposed? None? Okay. We'll move on to committee reports. I do not have anything to report at the moment. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Labisco.
Thank you, Mr. Panzera. First of all, I would like to welcome everyone, and I'd like to thank all those who voiced their concerns. We heard from staff, students, and parents, and I think that's important. From the beginning, we have set out to be transparent in what we've been doing. We are always listening and willing to discuss all concerns, and will continue to do so. So as I have at all my meetings to date, I'm going to start by just updating everyone on our reopening plan. These are important things to share with the school community. I'd like to continue to do so. So our reopening update for return to hybrid instruction on 2-4 is as follows. I'd like to start by just saying how serious the administration takes the reopening, and the concerns of the staff, the concerns of students, the concerns of parents are all factored in. As I've spoken to before, I really do appreciate hearing from everyone. When a school community comes together, that's important. We need to hear everyone's perspective. There's some things that came out in those statements that I want to share as well that were in my notes already, and that's that students' mental health is absolutely imperative to consider in these times. Their academic well-being is another one that needs to be tracked and addressed appropriately, and their social needs cannot be forgotten. What we want to make sure we work on doing together is an effort to be transparent, to communicate openly, to prepare appropriately. And I think those things have been done, and they will continue to do so, be done so. That's an effort that we're going to continue. The plan that everyone's spoken of, I think everyone can agree upon, is of the highest level. It factors in health and safety and makes that of the utmost importance. We also have already heard it, and it's in my plan, that we have the ability to pivot. And what I mean is we have a schedule that allows us, if circumstances arise, to have people go virtual with a schedule that is similar to the one they're using. And that way there is minimal impact there. Yes, it will not be perfect at times, and people have said that, but what we want to do is get the most effective opportunity for our students and factor in all of their needs, and that's why I spoke to those in the beginning of my report. The plan takes into consideration everyone's safety, but it also factors in the academic vulnerability of students. If you ask me, after almost a year out of school, our students are all academically vulnerable right now, and that's something we have to gauge and address. and it's important that we continue to do so. We've talked about these things, but what we've done to date is a building walkthrough with the association. We stayed until all questions were answered. We did an entire faculty Q&A session, and again, we stayed until all questions were answered and addressed. Mr. Coviello did a very thorough faculty and staff reopening training. And in terms of community messaging, it's been consistent and constant outreach for both parents and students in multiple languages, and it will continue to be in that way. There's trainings coming up and Q&A sessions coming up for parents and students, and other messaging will happen as needed after that. The faculty and staff have been informed of their return date well in advance so they could make the necessary plans for that. When we look at the big picture, we of course have been looking at other schools, and we know that some schools have been able to remain open throughout. Some have had to pivot in and out, and some have stayed virtual. And New Jersey allowed districts to do what was best for their people. And the Board of Education made that decision, and the date was set for 2/4, and we've been considering everything when getting things ready for that date. What we've also looked at is what's going on in the school districts around us, and generally what we're seeing is right now of the high schools in Passaic County and also the sending districts, we're seeing 8 hybrid and 5 virtual schools. We also started sports, and that was also factoring in students' social needs and their mental health, and that began, and boys and girls basketball and bowling have all started. Yes, we do have the girls on a bit of a pause right now, but we have the procedures all ready when those situations arise, and we do take everyone's safety to the utmost importance for that. But with all that said, the date of 2/4 was established by the board in November. And at this time, we do not have reason to recommend differently. The administrative team and I will continue to review all relevant information regarding the reopening and make a recommendation differently if needed. So what I just wanted to continue to do was share everything that we are tracking and looking at and doing to prepare our students, our faculty, and everyone to come back to school on 2/4. So yes, once again, I'd like to thank all those folks that came today because this is a very important meeting, and we are happy to have heard your concerns, and we do appreciate the participation by staff, by parents, and by students. So other than that, Mr. Panzera, I think my superintendent report is all set. There are a couple things a little bit later on that I might have to chime in on if there are any questions about some of the items, but you know, those are the major issues that I wanted to bring forth to the entire school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labisco.
Mr. Labisco, I'd just like to say that I'm impressed with the thoroughness of what you have just reviewed. And more than that, I know you said you were going to involve the stakeholders in any reopening of school and other areas that when you came to the school. And you've already met with community people and with their staff. And I know you started to meet with board members and you met with myself and others already. And I don't recall ever, since I've been here, I've been under many superintendents that has ever occurred. So I thank you for doing that and for getting our flavor of what we feel about the school and input from us also. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And really, that's the only way it works is when the entire school community is informed, they have an opportunity to express where they are and what's on their mind, and that all that's factored into decisions that affect all of us. So just a quick update on that. You know, I just didn't want to take everyone's time up on that, but that's, you know, a very positive thing in which it allows me to see the entire district. That reopening, entry plan has been happening as all these other things are happening. And right now I'm meeting the board members for those questions I posted online and really getting me a full picture of what's going on in the district, both past and present and future. Next, as I've stated, I'm going to be talking to the association leadership and the school leadership, and then from that, community members. So we're going to continue that outreach, and it'll continue throughout this entire time. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Sarapilia, your report.
Good evening, everybody. I wanted to go over some of the resolutions on you hear me, right? On the resolutions that we have on the agenda tonight. The first one I wanted to talk about was a shared service, it being suspended for the 2020-21 school year. This is a shared service agreement that we have with Halden for a speech teacher. That speech teacher retired. They were out on leave. While they were out on leave, both ourselves and Halden had been outsourcing through United Therapy. That would continue for the rest of the 2020-21 school year. However, the plan is to reinstate the shared service with Halden hiring a teacher and the speech person being provided to Manchester for 1 day a week during the 2021-22 school year. Other items I wanted to address, we had to make a slight revision to our agreement with the school doctor, which is why that is back on the agenda. You can actually see what was added on. I believe it was highlighted. We also had an addendum. This is for the 21-22 school year with Altice, that's Cablevision Lightpath, in regards to a contract that we're looking to approve for 2021-22. This is actually increased bandwidth even more, again, with the Chromebooks and the virtual learning that's going on and the hybrid that we could potentially be going on in 2021-22. We were looking at increasing it even more. As a part of E-rate, 80% of the cost of this would be paid by the federal government. Other items that I wanted to touch on, as I spoke about in my presentation, budget work is ongoing. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have CARES money. I also wanted to let the board know that we did apply for FEMA reimbursement money. Anything that really we can apply towards CARES, we have been, but the CARES grant did get released in July of 2020. So anything prior to that was purchasing related to really reopening the school, because as you recall at the time we were buying items at the end of the 1920 school year. We have applied to FEMA for reimbursement for that. We are also waiting on reimbursement for our security upgrades through Alyssa's Law. We are proceeding forward with the weight room renovation. We have already, as you recall at the last board meeting, we did approve the purchase of equipment. We've actually reached out to all of the police departments to ask if they're interested in any of the equipment rather than simply discarding it. We were seeing if any of the 3 towns has any need for any of the equipment. This actually started with the Halden Police Department, but we did reach out to both Prospect Park and North Halden, and we're awaiting responses from them. A reminder that the board, I don't know if we wanted to utilize the personnel committee or form another ad hoc committee, but we do need to form a committee to meet with Halden Board of Education about the shared service on the BA contract. As you recall, that contract is expiring at the end of the school year, June 2021. Both boards had agreed to renew it. There was discussion about potential tweaks to the contract here and there. So if we can have some sort of committee, like I said, either personnel or an ad hoc committee formed to meet with them, with obviously the board president being a part of that meeting. And finally, we had talked about the potential of getting a renovation to our S1 room, which is currently a computer lab. We were looking at the possibility of making this an Apple lab to enhance the curriculum for the high school. We have been getting pricing on it. We do have pricing for the computers. Overall, to redo the room would cost anywhere between $90,000 and $95,000. We have the cost on the computers, that's $72,000. We're just waiting on the cost for the furniture. But I wanted to make the board aware of that. And we could potentially be discussing that at a future date. That's all I have for my report. Does anybody have any questions?
No?
Nothing?
Okay.
All right. I can't.
I
I'm
can't
sorry.
hear.
Oh, there you go.
No, that was Bridget.
No, I couldn't hear somebody that was asking a question.
No.
Okay.
It should be on the computer. Nope.
How about now?
Oh, there you go.
My mic was too far. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so my question was regards to the suspended services for the teacher. You said that that's going to be reinstated for 21-22, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Vandermolen, did you have a personnel report?
The committee did not meet this evening. However, we have three resolutions under new business.
Mr. Barca with Finance.
Okay, the Finance Committee did meet this evening at 6:30. In attendance was Mr. Sarapilia, Mr. Panzera, Mr. DeMarco, Mr. Gonzalez, and myself. We discussed, actually, Mr. Sarapilia reviewed the purchasing procedures for the district. We also discussed agenda items, including the CAFRA and the CAP. And we finished the meeting discussing the fund balance, the excessive surpluses, and possibility of looking at the field to redo the field. So that was basically it. The meeting ended at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Ms. Arick with Education Report.
Yes, education met at the same time at 6:30. Meeting with Superintendent Lebowski, Ms. Baez, myself, and Mr. Fisher. We discussed a couple of things, the Apple computer lab and the benefits of that. We also talked about the reopening plan, and then we also made note of the CUSAC signing by the governor and the upcoming discussion that we would possibly have and the pros and cons of that. The superintendent evaluation, we went over some protocols with that. And then we also talked about the many opportunities that the Apple Lab, to which I'm hopeful that superintendent will elaborate on, that's coming to our district, and the great possibilities that it has. And we ended at 6:58 actually. We ended at 6:58.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arick. Do you have any report for the state and county?
The county, yes, the county, the first meeting is February the 8th. That's when I'll get some updates. But I also wanted to note to the board that there are several things that's on the agenda for the legislation that is some updates. A couple is 8 legislations that's out there that the Senate has to actually advance teacher diversity package, where it will help hire more teachers in a diverse different subjects as ELA, ESL, and trying to get those teachers, male teachers and other mentors to actually navigate into a teacher's role. So if you actually just go to NJSBA, there are several legislations that's being discussed, and it looks like it would help us, being the multicultural district that we are, and some of the challenges that we have in hiring minority teachers is some bills that's coming down the line. But we don't meet officially until February the 8th, and I'll have an update with that.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Eric, I think what you're alluding to is, I think Senator Rose is sponsoring most of these bills about the diversity, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Vandermolen, do you have anything for the state?
Just briefly, that the New Jersey School Boards continues to offer virtual studies on various topics that are online. And I just recently looked at the New Jersey School Board Leader. It's a magazine that they publish monthly or bi-monthly. And there's some interesting articles in there. And one of it is on electing a board leader, and the other is virtual education. And I think the other is ethics law. So it's makes for interesting reading, and I advise you to read that if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vandermolen. Okay, at this time, Mr. Vandermolen, would you like to move personnel?
Yes, I'd like to move 8.1 through 8.3.
Any second?
I'll second it.
A second by Mr. Barca. Any questions?
Just a quick statement. We worked on these. This is just a reminder to those folks, that this is just a summary of what we had put together during the transition workshop. And I just like the comment again, that was a tremendous workshop. I thought Kathy did a great job, but it was really good to get to dig in with you guys and start talking about, what you value and what we want to do together. So these are the goals that we spoke about there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Baez,
Yes.
Ms. Arick,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. Anyone else? I'm making noise.
Feedback?
No, but Mr. President, I think you skipped 7.1.
I did. 7.1. Move shared services.
So moved, John.
Second.
We're moving 8 or 7. I thought the motion was to go on. The second.
We had skipped 7.1, so we went back.
Okay. All right. But I thought the other one was second. No?
We
No,
just
the
voted
last-
on, was, 8.1 to 8.3.
8.3.
Right.
But we skipped 7.1.
No, I get that.
We're going back.
Second, we have to have a vote. That's okay.
I moved it.
Second. Oh, sorry. Were there any questions about your services?
Miss Arick,
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
Ms. Baez,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. 9. Education. Would you like to?
You're breaking up. I'm sorry, say that again.
Would you like to move it? Education.
Sure, education, I'd like to move 9.1 through 9.5.
Second. Second. Mr. Gonzalez. Questions?
You're
Can you hear
bad,
me?
Valdo. It's
Mr. President, I think it's your mic. It's like really breaking up.
Are there any questions?
you sound like Max Headroom.
Yeah, your mic is really breaking up.
I haven't heard that reference in a long time, Jeff.
I show my age, I guess.
No, I remember him. You know, I just hadn't thought about it.
That's it. Yeah.
Take a time can, what's your name? Vandermoen? Run?
You want me? He's getting a new computer.
Yeah.
You okay, Mr. President?
Yep, we're sorry about that, everybody, for the technical difficulties. Hey. Back. Finance. Mr. Barker, would you like to move finance?
Did we take? Did we do the vote on education?
No, we didn't finish.
No.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's continue the vote on education. Ms. Sarapia, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Ms. Baez,
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
Ms. Arick,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. Mr. Barker, would you like to move finance?
I'd like to move 10.1 through 10.14.
Do I have a second?
Second. DeMarco.
Mr. DeMarco, second. Mr. Any questions? Mr. Sarapia, please call the roll.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Ms. Baez,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
I'd say yes to everything, abstaining from under the finance chain of bills, PO number 100596 for the Windsor Academy.
okay. Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
Mr. Vandermolen,
Yes.
and Mr. Panzera.
Yes. Okay, at this time, any old or new business that would like to be discussed at this time?
No, I just, I'd like to thank the superintendent for reaching out and doing what he actually did in terms of getting our feedback. I don't know if you want to go into I'm excited about the Apple thing, I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit more, in detail. I thank the parents and actually the staff for coming out and expressing their concerns about our reopening, and all of those points were taken and valid. And last but not least, I welcome you to, Superintendent, to meet our community. All three towns have great communities and stakeholders, so I hope that you reach out to those, and we give recommendations to those individuals that may want to meet you.
Absolutely, and thank you. And certainly I can just highlight a few of the things that we discussed, but the Apple Lab is an exciting opportunity for us. There's a few things I can just talk to right away, but what it would first do is give us kind of a bilingual look, where right now we're only PCs. This would give us a PC and Mac opportunity for our students to learn and enhance their knowledge on how to operate both systems. From the feedback and looking into it with tech people, both in the tech world and in the education world, acquiring that ability to utilize a Mac really opens doors for students. And what we're seeing is that the industry standard a lot of times, especially in fields like digital arts, video production, animation, and web design, really can be enhanced by having the Macs there for our students. The students will experience less frustration a lot of times where those PCs can become slow and a little bit cumbersome, a little quicker than a Mac. Their computing power is second to none. Our curriculum will be able to explore and expand with those devices. And certainly those are things we want to look at to provide more opportunity for our students. We don't want to jump the gun or rush anything, but we do know that there's different opportunities for kids available using those devices, and that's really exciting. The Macs last longer also than PCs generally. Their life is expected to be double, and only for a slightly higher cost. Again, because of the hardware and their superior computing capabilities, less likely to get viruses and all those things. We do think those will give us more for the dollar. Our students will also be able to compete at the same level or higher than to other students that are using this type of equipment. And it gives them professional experience, stuff that they would actually experience in the real world in these areas. So it's a tremendous opportunity. We have a great teacher, and Ms. Hernandez will be able to combine those things, that cutting edge technology and work experience really with those Macs. And students will now be able to generate even more professional level publications. So whether it's brochures or playbills or whatever, the software really is superior on those machines. And some of the best high schools offer both. That's often what happens. It's, I'm not saying right now we're going to become all Apple or all PC. Having both, I think, is an important thing because they give different avenues and different opportunities and different curriculum avenues for our teachers to explore, for our administrators to support and develop, and for our students to have access to. So those are some of the things we talked about in education, and I really think having something like that is that infrastructure needed to expand those opportunities in the digital world, in the technology world, and this would be a tremendous step for Manchester. So I really think this would be a great addition.
I think at the appropriate time, you'd have to give us the whole picture of what the costs involved, the servicing, and how many students we could reach with this, and operational, I guess, in a fall would be, right?
We should be able to do that sooner, but certainly, yes.
Okay.
And obviously, it'll be first, more the design of the classroom, what it can enhance right now that we have, and then we would look at what we can expand to and what our teaching capacity would be to offer other things than we are offering now, if that makes sense.
So it'd be a limited amount of students that would be able to be serviced, correct?
Correct, but we anticipate now being able to put more devices in that room than are currently in there, and they'd be better devices. So we really like that opportunity as well. It'll be a more interactive design, that we would like to explore as well, and how the room is set up to really make it more conducive and reflective of the real world.
I'm not sure if you had the conversations yet with Apple, but I know especially for education, they're offering a tremendous amount of free professional development.
I would think so.
Yeah, they're chomping at the bit to get into the schools. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's out there.
And I will say this too, we in terms of the Apple world, we have a gem here, Mr. Pagani, who knows Apple inside and out. So he really has been instrumental in us understanding it and understanding the capabilities there. So, kudos to him for his help in exploring this as well.
I would agree with you, Ralph. I think they'd be delighted to come in here and help us out in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's tremendous opportunities, and also we see it as a. I think that we talked about it in our committee meeting that we opened up we opened up the innovation center, and this is just an expansion to that. That would be a nice expansion.
I agree with you, Ms. Arick, that we did speak about that here's another thing to hang our hat on, that this is a tremendous offering that Manchester can give our students. I mean, just look at the room we're in right now. This is a state-of-the-art educational room right here. This is tremendous, and that Apple room will be another one like that. And it's an exciting opportunity. But to your point, Mr. Barker, as well, I completely agree. As we know, they kind of got beat out by the Chromebooks as the everyday device. So certainly, I'm sure they would welcome that opportunity.
All right. Anybody else for old or new business? Okay. I'll take a motion at this time to open the floor to the public.
Motion.
A motion by Mr. Barker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Baez? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. At this time, Pat, do you have anybody wishing to speak to the speak from the public?
I have not received anything at this time.
Okay, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand button. Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the floor to the public.
Motion to close, John.
Second.
Motion by John. Second by Mr. Barker. Do you have anything for executive session? Nothing? Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Ralph. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned, 9:46.